Jack Reacher had no reason to stop in Harmony Creek, Virginia. He'd never heard of it. The name itself was an offense to his sensibilities. Too neat, too clean, too much like a promise. Promises were made to be broken. He'd learned that much in 40 years of life and a career cleaning up the messes left behind by broken promises. Still, the bus had a scheduled 30-minute layover and his legs were stiff. He stepped off into a town square that looked like a movie set. Manicured lawns, a central gazebo gleaming with fresh white paint, and storefronts with colorful, welcoming awnings. Too perfect. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Perfection was a lie. He walked, aimless, just stretching his muscles, his internal clock counting down the minutes until the bus engine rumbled back to life. He noticed the flyers first, tacked to telephone poles, taped in the windows of the bakery and the hardware store. The face of a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, smiled out from the pages. Her name was Lily Caldwell. She had been missing for 48 hours. Reacher wasn't a cop anymore. He wasn't anyone's hero. He was a ghost, a man who left no footprints. But he had been a cop, and the habits died hard. He read the details. Last seen in her own front yard, on the wealthiest street in this impossibly perfect town. No witnesses, no ransom note, just gone. He stopped at a diner with a chrome and red vinyl interior that smelled of stale coffee and fresh grease. He took a seat at the counter and ordered a black coffee. The waitress, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda, slid the mug toward him without a word. The place was quiet, the lunchtime rush over. The silence was heavy, thick with unspoken anxiety. "Town seems quiet," Reacher said, his voice a low rumble that made Brenda jump. She nodded, wiping down a clean section of the counter. "It's Lily, the Caldwell girl. Everyone's on edge. Police have any leads?" Brenda leaned in, lowering her voice. "Sheriff Brody says they're pursuing all avenues. That's what he said on the local news. But people are whispering. The Caldwells are important. Marcus Caldwell practically owns this town." Reacher took a slow sip of the coffee. It was bitter, just how he liked it. "Important people have enemies." "Or secrets," Brenda whispered, her eyes flicking toward the door as if the sheriff himself might walk in. "That family has more secrets than a priest has sins." Reacher finished his coffee, left $3 on the counter, and walked out. His bus was due to leave in 10 minutes. He could be in another state by nightfall, another world away from Harmony Creek and its missing little girl. He walked toward the bus station, but his feet felt heavy. He saw the sheriff's department across the square. It was a modest brick building, but a brand-new, top-of-the-line patrol car was parked out front. Paid for by Marcus Caldwell's tax dollars, he figured. He saw the sheriff exit the building. A big man, like Reacher, but soft in the middle. He had a politician's smile plastered on his face as he spoke to a local reporter. Reacher read the body language, the feigned confidence, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes scanned the street, not looking for clues, but for threats. Sheriff Brody wasn't in control. He was terrified. The bus engine coughed to life. It was a mechanical summons, a call back to the road, to anonymity. Reacher looked at the flyer in the diner window, at Lily Caldwell's trusting smile. Then he looked at the soft, scared sheriff and the too perfect town. Perfection was a lie, and lies, Reacher knew, were always worth exposing. He let the bus pull away without him. His first stop was the Caldwell residence. It was a mansion, a sprawling colonial beast set back from the road on a ridiculously green lawn. 2 police cars were parked in the driveway. Reacher walked up the long, curving path as if he belonged there. A young deputy stopped him at the door. "Can I help you, sir?" the kid asked, his hand resting self-consciously on his sidearm. "I have some information about the girl," Reacher said. It wasn't a lie. He had information. The information was that the local police were out of their depth. The deputy's eyes widened. He led Reacher inside, into a cavernous foyer with a marble floor and a chandelier that probably cost more than Reacher's last 10 years of living expenses. Sarah Caldwell, Lily's mother, sat on a pristine white sofa, her face a mask of grief. Her husband Marcus stood by a massive fireplace, talking on his phone in a low, angry voice. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of smooth, handsome face that graced the covers of business magazines. He radiated power and impatience. Sheriff Brody was there too. He turned as Reacher entered, and his eyes narrowed. "Who's this?" "He says he has information," the deputy squeaked. Brody sized Reacher up, his gaze lingering on Reacher's size, his plain, worn clothes, his seen-it-all expression. "What information?" "I was in town the day she disappeared," Reacher said calmly. "Saw a car. Didn't think anything of it at the time. Dark sedan. Out-of-state plates. Drove by this street twice, slow. It was a lie, of course. A simple, plausible lie designed to get a reaction." He watched them all. The deputy looked hopeful. The mother, Sarah, looked up, a flicker of desperation in her eyes. The father, Marcus, ended his call and stared at Reacher with cold suspicion. But it was Brody's reaction that was most telling. He didn't ask for a description. He didn't ask for a license plate number. His face tightened, a flash of pure panic in his eyes before he masked it with professional skepticism. "We've already looked into all vehicles in the area," Brody said dismissively. "Thanks for your civic duty, but we have it covered. You can show yourself out." Marcus Caldwell stepped forward. "Hold on. What did you see exactly?" Reacher met his gaze. "A dark sedan, maybe a Ford. Watch this house." He looked from Caldwell to Brody. "Seems like the kind of lead a competent sheriff would want to follow up on." Brody's jaw clenched. "We're not going to be sidetracked by every drifter who wanders into town looking for attention." Reacher ignored him, his eyes locked on Marcus Caldwell. "Your daughter is missing. Your sheriff is scared. You should be asking why." Before anyone could react, Reacher turned and walked out. He didn't need to be inside. He had what he came for. Brody was hiding something. And Caldwell, for all his bluster, seemed less like a grieving father and more like a man watching a deal go bad. Reacher found a cheap motel on the edge of town. He paid cash for one night. He didn't plan on sleeping. He walked the town, absorbing its layout. He noted the cameras on the main street, the patrol patterns of the 2, now 3, police cars. He ended up back at the diner for dinner. Brenda served him a Salisbury steak without a word, but her eyes were full of questions. "The sheriff doesn't like you," she said, refilling his coffee. "The feeling's mutual," Reacher replied. "Be careful," she warned. "This town, it takes care of its own. And it doesn't like outsiders asking questions." Later that night, Reacher took a walk to the Caldwell's neighborhood. He stayed in the shadows of the large manicured hedges. He watched the house. The lights were on. A police car sat empty in the drive. At 2:13 a.m., a car pulled up to the curb, its lights off. Marcus Caldwell got out of his house, slipped into the passenger seat of the waiting car, and it drove away. Reacher followed on foot. He was a block behind, but the town was dead silent. He could hear the car's engine, even from a distance. The car went to a warehouse on the industrial outskirts of town. Caldwell was inside for 20 minutes. When he came out, his shoulders were slumped in defeat. He got back in the car and was driven home. Reacher stayed put, watching the warehouse. Nothing. It was a ghost, but it was something. It was a place the grieving father of a kidnapped girl went in the middle of the night. The next morning, Reacher went to the public library. He used their computer to look up Marcus Caldwell and his businesses. Caldwell Industries was the parent company of nearly everything in Harmony Creek. The bottling plant, the lumber mill, the real estate company that owned most of the commercial buildings. The warehouse he'd visited last night was one of theirs, listed for storage. He also found a string of campaign donations to one Sheriff William Brody. He was leaving the library when two deputies cornered him. They were bigger than the one at the house, and meaner. "Sheriff wants to see you," one of them grunted. They didn't ask nicely. They flanked him, hands on their holsters. Reacher didn't resist. He let them lead him to the station, into Brody's office. The sheriff was sitting behind his desk, trying to look intimidating. "I told you to leave town," Brody said, his voice a low growl. "I like the coffee," Reacher said. "You're interfering with a police investigation, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Funny," Reacher countered. "I don't see much of an investigation. I see a cover-up. What are you hiding, Sheriff? What does Marcus Caldwell have on you?" Brody shot to his feet, his face turning a blotchy red. "You think you can come into my town and—" "I think a little girl is missing," Reacher cut him off, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "And the only people who don't seem to want her found are you and her father. So I'm going to ask you again. Where is she?" Brody's composure snapped. He lunged across the desk. It was a clumsy, telegraphed move. Reacher barely shifted his weight, catching the sheriff's wrist and using his momentum to slam him face first onto the desk. The two deputies drew their guns. "I wouldn't," Reacher said, not even looking at them. He applied a little pressure to Brody's wrist. The sheriff gasped. "You don't want to find her because her disappearance isn't random, is it? It's leverage. Someone is squeezing Caldwell, and you're helping them." "You're crazy," Brody wheezed. Reacher applied more pressure. A sickening crack echoed in the small office. Brody screamed. The deputies hesitated. Reacher released him and turned to face them. "Your boss is compromised," he said, his eyes like chips of ice. "You can be compromised with him, or you can tell me what you know." He walked out of the station. No one tried to stop him. He knew they'd be back, and with more force. But he'd confirmed the truth. The conspiracy was real. Now he just needed to find the man at the top. He needed an ally, someone on the inside. He thought of Sarah Caldwell, the mother. Her grief was real. She was being lied to by her own husband. He found her in the garden behind the mansion, listlessly pruning roses. She looked up as he approached, her eyes full of fear. "They said you attacked the sheriff." "The sheriff is lying to you," Reacher said, getting straight to the point. "So is your husband. Where did he go last night?" Her face paled. "He was here. He never left." "He left at 2:13 a.m. He went to one of his warehouses on the edge of town. He met someone." "Who did he meet?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know anything." "Yes, you do," Reacher said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You know your husband has been in trouble. You know his business hasn't been doing as well as he pretends. You know he's been taking calls from a man he's afraid of. Who is it?" She broke down, sobbing quietly. "His name is Silas Thorne. He owns a small accounting firm in town. But he's not just an accountant. He approached Marcus months ago. A loan, he called it, to help the business. But it wasn't a loan. It was an anchor. He started telling Marcus what to do, which shipments to prioritize at the plant, which trucks to use. Marcus said it was poison. He was laundering money through our company. Marcus wanted out. And then they took Lily." The final piece clicked into place. Silas Thorne. The quiet accountant. The spider in the center of the web. He had Marcus Caldwell and Sheriff Brody in his pocket. He was running an operation through the town's main business, and when Caldwell got cold feet, Thorne took his daughter to ensure his cooperation. "Where would he keep her?" Reacher asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "But the trucks, the ones Thorne made him use, they always went to the old cannery by the river. It's been shut down for years. That was it. A derelict building, isolated, perfect. Stay here," Reacher told her. "Call the state police. Don't trust Brody. Tell them everything." Reacher didn't wait for a reply. He was already moving. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the perfect lawns of Harmony Creek. The old cannery was a skeleton of rust and broken windows looming over the slow-moving river. There were no lights on, no signs of life, but Reacher knew better. He circled the perimeter, moving through the overgrown weeds like a phantom. He saw fresh tire tracks leading to a loading bay at the rear. A single car was parked inside the shadows of the bay, a dark sedan. Same as the lie he'd told the sheriff. Sometimes you get lucky. He found an unsecured window on the second floor. The glass was gone. The frame rotted. He pulled himself up and through, landing silently on the dusty floor inside. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else. Something chemical. He moved through the cavernous, debris-strewn main floor. He could hear voices below from a single lit office in the corner. He crept closer, peering through the grimy glass of the office door. Silas Thorne was inside. In person, he was utterly unremarkable. A man in his 60s, balding, wearing a cheap suit. He looked like what he was supposed to be, a small-town accountant. Sheriff Brody was with him, pacing nervously. Two heavily armed men stood by the door. Lily Caldwell was not there. "Caldwell's wife is going to break," Brody was saying, his voice strained. "And that drifter, he knows. He broke my wrist." "Calm down, William," Thorne said, his voice soft, almost grandfatherly. It was more chilling than any shout. "Everything is under control. The shipment is leaving tonight. Once it's gone, we'll return the girl and disappear. Caldwell will keep his mouth shut to protect his own skin, and your wrist will heal. And the drifter? He will be taken care of," Thorne said, looking at one of the armed men. "He's a loose end. Find him, and be permanent about it." Reacher had heard enough. He backed away from the door. The girl wasn't here. They were moving her. And they were moving a shipment. That meant a truck. He scanned the dark warehouse again. In the far corner, covered by a heavy tarp, was the unmistakable shape of a large transport truck. He made his way over, his feet making no sound on the concrete. He lifted a corner of the tarp. The truck was a tanker. The chemical smell was stronger here. Not money laundering, manufacturing, drugs. Harmony Creek's prosperity wasn't from bottling water. It was from bottling something far more lucrative and deadly. He heard a noise from behind the truck. A small whimper. He moved around the massive vehicle and saw her. Lily Caldwell was tied to a chair, a piece of tape over her mouth. A single guard sat a few feet away, reading a magazine. Reacher didn't hesitate. He closed the distance in 3 silent strides. The guard looked up, his eyes widening in surprise, but it was too late. Reacher's hand clamped over the man's mouth while his other arm wrapped around his neck. It was over in seconds. The man went limp. Reacher knelt in front of the girl. He put a finger to his lips, then gently peeled the tape from her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror. "I'm going to get you out of here," he whispered. "Don't make a sound." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. He quickly worked on the ropes binding her to the chair. They were amateur knots. He had her free in less than a minute. "We have to go. Now," he said. But as he helped her to her feet, the main warehouse lights flashed on, flooding the space with harsh fluorescent glare. Thorne, Brody, and their 3 remaining men stood by the office, guns raised. They had been found out. "Well, well," Silas Thorne said, his pleasant demeanor unchanged. "The loose end. How very convenient. Put the girl down. She is of no use to you." Reacher pushed Lily behind him. He was out in the open. 5 men, 4 of them armed. The odds weren't good, but they never were. "It's over, Thorne," Reacher said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Sarah Caldwell is calling the state police right now." Thorne chuckled. "She can call whoever she likes. By the time they get to this sleepy little town and cut through my sheriff's red tape, we'll be long gone, and you will be a tragic casualty of a drug deal gone wrong." He nodded to his men. "Kill him." The first man came at him, a big bruiser who clearly relied on strength. He swung his rifle like a club. Reacher ducked under the swing, drove his elbow into the man's sternum, and followed with a palm strike to the nose. The man collapsed, gagging on his own blood. The second and third men opened fire. The sound was deafening. Reacher shoved Lily behind the tanker truck and dived for cover behind a stack of old pallets. Splinters flew as bullets tore through the wood. He was pinned down. Brody was shouting, his voice shrill with panic. Thorne was yelling orders, calm and precise. Reacher needed to change the equation. He looked at the tanker truck. A thick hose ran from one of the valves. He could smell the volatile chemicals. An idea formed, a terrible, desperate idea. He waited for a lull in the shooting. He broke cover, sprinting not away but toward the truck. A bullet grazed his arm, a hot, searing pain. He ignored it. He reached the hose, wrenched open the valve. A clear, viscous liquid began pouring onto the concrete floor, the fumes instantly acrid and overwhelming. "He's flooding the floor!" Thorne yelled. "Shoot him!" Reacher scrambled under the truck, pulling Lily with him. The chemical was pooling around them. "What is that stuff?" Brody yelled, backing away. "Ether," Thorne said, his voice finally losing its calm. "The whole place will go up. Get out!" Thorne and his last remaining gunman turned to run. Sheriff Brody, a coward to the end, was already scrambling for the exit. Reacher knew he had seconds. He looked around in the gloom under the truck. His eyes landed on a set of heavy-duty jumper cables hanging from a hook on the wall nearby. He grabbed them. He clamped one end to the truck's battery terminal. He told Lily, "When I tell you to run, you run to the back loading door and don't stop. Understand?" She nodded, trembling. He peeked out. Thorne and his man were almost at the door. Brody was fumbling with the lock. "Now!" Reacher yelled. Lily scrambled out from under the truck and ran. The gunman turned, distracted by the movement. It was the opening Reacher needed. He touched the other end of the jumper cables to the spreading pool of ether. The world erupted in a flash of white-hot fire and a concussive roar. A wave of flame washed across the warehouse floor, vaporizing the ether in an instant. The force of the explosion threw Reacher against the truck's tires, knocking the wind out of him. The heat was immense. He crawled out from under the truck into a scene from hell. The warehouse was an inferno. The bodies of Thorne and his men were burning shapes near the door. The tanker truck itself was groaning, the metal buckling from the heat. It was going to blow. He staggered to his feet and ran. He found Lily huddled by the loading bay door, miraculously unharmed. He grabbed her hand and pulled her out into the cool night air. They didn't stop running until they were 100 yards away. Then the tanker exploded, a massive fireball that lit up the night sky and tore the old cannery to pieces. The sound was biblical. Sirens wailed in the distance. The state police finally arriving. Reacher led Lily away from the fire toward the sound of the approaching help. He saw the flashing lights of the first state trooper car as it screeched to a halt down the road. He pushed Lily gently toward it. "Go on," he said. "They'll take you to your mother." She looked up at him, her small face smudged with soot. "Who are you?" "Just a guy who was passing through," Reacher said. He watched her run toward the police, then he turned and melted back into the shadows. By the time the authorities had secured the scene and found what was left of Silas Thorne and his operation, Jack Reacher was gone. He walked to the next town, his arm throbbing, the smell of smoke in his clothes. He found an all-night bus station and bought a one-way ticket to somewhere else. Anywhere else. The name didn't matter. As the bus pulled out, he looked back at the faint orange glow on the horizon that was once Harmony Creek. A perfect town built on a lie, now cleansed by fire. He closed his eyes. The road ahead was long, and he had miles to go before he slept.